It started with the smell. Not of sewage. Not yet. But something worse. The smell of control that I had lived on Cedar Ridge Drive for 6 quiet years before the HOA decided my property was an eyesore. It was not. At least not to me. My lawn was neat enough. The fences were white. The mailbox stood straight. But the problem as they saw it was not the look. It was that I did not fit their version of perfect. My name is Mark Ellison. I am 42 years old, an engineer, and until last year I thought rules were good things. I followed them, paid my dues on time, never left my garbage cans out. But then the HOA came for me over something small. A water tank that was a small gray tank behind my garage. A rainwater system I had installed after a long drought. It helped save water, kept my bills down. I was proud of it. I showed it to my neighbors. Some thought it was smart. Others thought it was ugly. Then one morning a letter showed up in my mailbox. Sealed white paper with the HOA logo stamped on top. Notice of violation. Unapproved utility structure. They fined me $500. They gave me 10 days to remove the tank or face more penalties. I called the number listed at the bottom. A woman named Marla answered. Her tone could have frozen glass. Rainwater systems are not pre-approved structures, she said. They violate the community aesthetic. I laughed under my breath. Community aesthetic. It is behind my house. She did not laugh. You will need to remove it, Mr. Ellison. The board has spoken. I hung up and felt something shift inside me. It was not anger. Not yet. Just a deep awareness that I was being tested. The tank stayed. A week later they doubled the fine. Then tripled it. Soon the number hit 2,000. When I still did not budge, they started small tactics. A complaint about the color of my shutters. A citation for grass height. 1 inch too tall. Each notice was like a paper cut. Small. Petty. But together they started to bleed me. The worst part was not the money. It was the humiliation. I would step outside and see neighbors looking my way. Whispers carried across driveways. People who once waved now avoided eye contact. That was when I realized the HOA's real power was not in rules. It was in isolation. They could turn your own community against you. One night around 10, I heard footsteps by the garage. I looked through the blinds and saw flashlights. 2 men in reflective vests. One holding a clipboard, the other taking photos of the tank. They moved like inspectors, but something felt wrong. I stepped outside. Can I help you? The taller one turned. His vest had the HOA logo stitched across it. Routine inspection, he said flatly, at 10 o'clock at night. But he did not answer. He just scribbled something on his clipboard. I took a step closer. Who sent you? The board, he said. We are authorized to document violations. The next morning, I found another notice on my porch. This time with a fine of $3,000 and the words failure to comply in red. That was the moment I stopped being polite. I started digging. Every HOA has rules, but they also have records, and records leave trails. I learned that our president, Gregory Marsh, had been re-elected for 7 straight years, an unusual streak in a neighborhood where people barely agreed on fence colors. The HOA's annual budget exceeded $150,000, but less than half of that was detailed in public minutes. So where did the money go? The answer started to smell. Literally, behind the HOA office. A small brick building near the community pool. There was a fenced area marked maintenance access. I used to walk my dog past it every morning. It always smelled faintly of chlorine and something else. Faint sewage. At first I ignored it. But one night walking home late I saw a truck parked there. A sewage service vehicle with no company name. Just a blank white panel and a hose leading underground. 2 men worked quickly under the cover of darkness. I took out my phone and snapped a photo. That photo became the seed of everything that followed. The next day I brought it up casually at the next HOA meeting. The room was tense. Gregory sat at the front in a pressed blue suit. I noticed some maintenance work behind the office last night, I said. Are we installing something new? Gregory did not glance down. That is restricted maintenance. You are not permitted back there. But it is community property, I said. He leaned back, smiling the way people do when they think they have already won. Community property does not mean personal access, Mr. Ellison. I suggest you stop snooping before you create more problems for yourself. That smile. That smug, cold smirk. It was the spark that lit the fuse that I realized I was not dealing with a board of volunteers anymore. I was dealing with a machine built on intimidation, that I walked out of that meeting with a calm I did not feel. Behind my ribs, anger began to hum like an engine, that if Gregory wanted to play dirty, I would show him what dirty really looked like. That night, as the sun dipped behind the cul-de-sac, and porch lights flickered one by one, stood by my rain tank, my unapproved structure. I looked out across the street. The world was quiet. Too quiet. The perfect kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. And for the first time, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a man with a plan. Because if the HOA wanted to bury me under rules and fines, I was about to drown them in their own sewage. If you have ever dealt with someone who mistook power for decency, you will want to hear what happens next. If you have ever wished you could turn the tables on people who thought they owned you, stay till the end. This is where it gets dirty. I woke early the next morning. The air was cool. Mist rolled low across the street. My coffee tasted sharper than usual. I watched the sun rise behind the houses and thought about that photo on my phone. The white truck. The hose. The secret smell behind the HOA office. That picture sat in my mind all day. During work, I found myself staring at blueprints on mites, but thinking of pipes and drains. My engineering brain began connecting dots that no one else had noticed. If the HOA was running a sewage line behind the office, without a permit, it meant one thing. Someone was hiding money. That evening, I opened my laptop and started searching public utility records. Every property in the county had a listed connection point for water and waste. The HOA office was marked as serviced by the main line. No additional connection. No registered maintenance request, and no record of underground work in the last 5 years. Whatever they were doing, it was off the books. I drove there after dark. Parked a few houses away. Walked the dog like I had every night for years. The smell was stronger. A sour tang that caught in the back of the throat. I saw damp soil along the fence line like it had been dug up and covered again. A small metal lid, half hidden under leaves, reflected the streetlight. I brushed the dirt away. It was a private drain cap. No number. No city markings. They were running sewage into a private tank. But why? The next day, I stopped by the local plumbing supply store. I told the guy behind the counter that I was looking for industrial hose fittings. I showed him a photo of the truck. He frowned, said it looked like a service rig used for septic transfers. Not legal for residential use. I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel. The pieces clicked together in my mind. The HOA fines. The missing money. The truck. The smell. Gregory Marsh was running an illegal waste disposal scheme and using HOA funds to pay himself for cleanup contracts. My tank had nothing to do with aesthetics. It was a cover story. He was silencing anyone who asked too many questions. That night, I printed everything I had. Photos. Records. The fine letters. I pinned them on the wall like evidence in a crime film. I needed proof solid enough to break through his control. Something he could not twist with words. I went to the county office the next morning. The clerk looked bored until I mentioned possible illegal waste dumping. Then she leaned forward. Her tone changed. She gave me a form for environmental complaints. She said the department took these cases seriously. I filled it out carefully. Dates. Locations. Names. I attached a photo of the truck. For the first time since this began, I felt a sliver of hope. But Gregory was faster. 2 days later, another envelope arrived. This one carried a legal tone. Cease and desist for harassment of HOA personnel. A warning that further defamation would result in legal action. The fine now stood at $4,500. I sat on the porch with that letter in my hand. The afternoon sun pressed down heavy. Migerton looked quiet. Bees floated between blossoms, unaware of the war going on above their heads. I realized I could not win this by following the rules. The rules were his weapon. I had to hit him somewhere he did not expect, somewhere he thought he was untouchable. That night I drove back to the office. I parked farther away, waited with the engine off. Around midnight the truck returned. Same blank white sides. 2 men stepped out. One wore gloves and a headlamp. They moved to the drain lid. One held the hose. The other opened a valve on the truck. I crept closer through the shadows. My phone camera recorded every second. The smell rolled over me. Thick, rotten. The sound of liquid rushing through pipes. I caught a clear shot of the license plate. When I looked up, Gregory himself was standing near the fence line. Suit jacket off, talking in a phone. I stayed low and recorded his silhouette against the truck lights. That footage became my leverage. The next morning, I emailed a copy of the video to the County Environmental Division with a short note. Possible illegal sewage transfer behind HOA office. Requesting investigation. I sent another copy to an anonymous Dropbox account. Backup. Always keep a backup. 2 days later, I saw unmarked vehicles parked near the HOA office. Men in hard hats walked the perimeter with clipboards. Gregory stood nearby looking nervous for the first time. I kept my distance, but watched every move. The inspectors lifted the drain lid and shined a flashlight inside. One of them shook his head. They spoke quietly, then made a call. By evening the news had spread. Someone had reported a contamination risk at the community office. The pool was closed until further notice. Residents were told to avoid the area. Gregory tried to spin it as routine maintenance, but people were whispering. The smell had turned into rumor, and rumor always spreads faster than truth. I waited. 3 days later another letter came. This time it was not a fine. It was a notice of emergency HOA meeting. Attendance mandatory. The night of the meeting I walked in wearing jeans and a plain shirt. The room was full, faces tense. Gregory sat at the front looking tired, but still proud. He opened with a practiced voice. "We are dealing with a misunderstanding regarding our maintenance system," he said. "Someone filed an environmental complaint against this board. Those allegations are false and defamatory." He looked straight at me. I let him talk. Let him build the wall higher. Then I raised my hand. "May I speak?" He hesitated, then nodded. I stepped forward holding my phone. The screen glowed pale in the fluorescent light. It pressed play. The room filled with the sound of engines. Water rushing. The image of the white truck filled the screen. The camera panned to Gregory's shadow near the fence. The silence after that was thick and sharp. I turned off the video and looked at the board. "That is your maintenance system." Gregory's face froze. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The room erupted. People stood. Voices overlapped. Someone shouted for him to resign. I walked out before it was over. The night air smelled clean for the first time in weeks, but I knew it was not finished. Men like Gregory never stop until they are forced to. He would come for me harder now. I needed to be ready for the final move. The sewage had exposed his corruption. Now I had to decide how to flush him out completely. The word payback sounded ugly in my mouth. It tasted like bitterness. But what I wanted was not revenge in the petty sense. I wanted accountability. I wanted rules to mean something again. I wanted the neighborhood to stop being a place where fear silenced people. That was my aim. Not violence. Not sabotage. Just exposure and consequence. After the meeting I sat in my car and watched the streetlights blur through the windshield. My phone buzzed with messages. Some people praised me. Others warned me. Gregory would not go quietly. I knew that. He had already shown his willingness to manufacture fines and threaten lawsuits. I also knew that if I played his game on his terms I would lose. So I made a rule. I would win by the rules everyone pretended to respect. I would force transparency. The first move was to organize witnesses. Neighbors are often quieter than you think. They keep receipts and collect notices in drawers. They photograph trucks with blank sides and keep emails they thought were unimportant. I knocked on doors. I offered coffee and quiet space for people to tell me what they knew. Rosa brought a stack of letters. A young couple produced photos of a flagged parcel that had been fined after a disagreement. A man named Tom handed me a file showing repeated charges on his account that matched inspections the board never documented. Each story was a thread. Together they formed a fabric. We formed a small neighborhood coalition. Not a mob. Not a tribunal. People who wanted their community back. We met late at night in my garage with the radio playing softly. We mapped timelines. We identified witnesses. We cataloged payments. We made copies of everything. No theatrics. No leaking rumors. Just careful documentation. If Gregory wanted to accuse me of harassment, I would have a paper trail that showed who had actually escaped to speak to the county. Next, I called the county back. I sat in the environmental office and watched the clerk type. Her eyes shifted when she saw the license plate photo and the video files. She did not smile, but she did act. Within days, an inspector contacted me and asked for a meeting. He said they could not act on hearsay, but that evidence with timestamps and witness statements could prompt an immediate audit. I gave them everything. The video, the license plate, the photo of the truck dumping near the maintenance area, the printed copies of the HOA payments traced to Hale Property Services. I handed over the list of names who were willing to give sworn statements. The inspector told me to sit tight. He said a team would be out that week. Sitting tight was not my style, so I laid my plan. While the county moved their bureaucracy, I put the story where it could not be ignored. I contacted Maya, the reporter, again. I arranged a quiet on-camera interview that would air the moment the county had concrete steps to announce. I wrote a short press packet with clear language. No sensationalism. Facts with dates. Photos with timestamps. Quotes from neighbors who were willing to speak on record. My aim was not to humiliate. It was to create a public record that matched the legal one. When two systems say the same thing to cover up struggles to survive, at home, I prepared for pushback. I installed more cameras in plain sight to deter late-night visits. I backed up every file to multiple drives and to the cloud. I practiced what I would say in the meeting and in front of a camera. Speaking plainly is easier when you have documents to hold. The coalition printed flyers that described homeowner rights and the steps to request HOA records under state law. We left them under windshield wipers and on porch steps. People read them and called. More witnesses emerged. The network grew slowly, like a root system. On the seventh day, the county moved. Inspectors in hard hats and mud-stained boots arrived at dawn. They pried open lids and tested water. They asked questions in a way that made Gregory flinch. The footage I had was already in their hands. The inspectors did not leak details. They acted. They closed the pool temporarily. They posted notices about possible contamination and an emergency audit. The message ricocheted through the neighborhood like a bell. People who had been quiet came forward. The coalition delivered sworn statements. Sarah filed for subpoenas to get bank records tied to the HOA. The machine I had built of paperwork and witnesses began to hum. Then I executed a step that felt both nerve-wracking and righteous. I handed the county a compiled packet and asked them to coordinate with Maya for a joint announcement. The press would come at midday. The inspectors would announce an investigation. The public would see the documents and the faces. It was a risky coordination. Public pressure can complicate legal processes. But this was not about theatrics. It was about creating an undeniable moment when the community could see the facts laid bare. Midday, the press van rolled into the parking lot. Cameras lined up like small black mouths waiting to speak. Maya asked simple, direct questions, and I answered with facts. When she asked why I had persisted, I said because rules meant something to me, and I could not watch them be used as weapons. Her segment aired that evening with a measured headline. The clip showed my footage of the truck. It showed invoices. It showed the inspector standing by a meter. It showed neighbors reading the county notice, taped to the HOA office door. People watched at dinner. Conversations erupted in living rooms. Social media amplified what a slow government audit could not do alone. Gregory's reaction was swift and unhinged. He called an emergency meeting and read a statement that blamed a conspiracy and suggested legal action. His words were rehearsed and furious. He accused me of fabrication and threatened lawsuits. But that storm did not land. The county had already issued a temporary injunction on the HOA's ability to sign new contracts. The bank had frozen certain disbursements pending forensic accounting. HOA Property Services saw their invoices questioned and their payments flagged. The control he exercised through finances began to dissolve. The final strand of the plan was a legal one. Sarah filed a civil suit on behalf of the coalition alleging conflict of interest conversion and breach of fiduciary duty. The complaint included the bank records we had subpoenaed. It included witness affidavits. It included the video and photos. It asked the court to compel restitution and to appoint an independent manager for the HOA until reforms could be instituted. The legal language was precise and cold. It did not need drama. The judge needed facts, and the facts we had were iron. Court dates moved the story into a different orbit. Depositions peeled back layers. Board members who had once nodded at Gregory's motions now spoke of pressure and fear. Pamela, the assistant, admitted in a closed session that she had signed forms under duress. Statements like that are small admissions, but in the slow scale of law, they are the beams that bring a building down. Throughout all of this, I never once whispered about throwing sewage in his yard. That would have been easy to imagine and cheap to enact. It might have landed a moment of satisfaction and a lifetime of liability. Instead, I let the sewage do my work for me. Its stench had already been a signal. Its presence made the corruption look grotesque and undeniable, by letting the physical evidence stand, and by refusing to give in to emotional retaliation, it turned the story of contamination into a mirror. The board placed before the community the consequences of their choices. When the judge finally ordered an independent audit, the ruling had the weight of a small revolution. The audit found irregular contracts. It found payments routed in ways consistent with self-dealing. It ordered restitution and removed Gregory and several board members from office, pending further rulings. Public trust returned slowly but surely. The HOA had been institutionalized in the wrong direction for years. The law corrected it. It was not poetous in a cinematic way. It was procedural and satisfying in a way that matters. That night, as I walked past the HOA office, the smell was still faint. The drain lid sat open and empty. The pool was closed, but the water was being treated properly. Neighbors stopped to say thank you, or to simply nod. Some offered apologies. Others still avoided my eyes. But the silence felt different now. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a storm that had passed and let the air clear in its wake. If you have ever wanted to see a system held to account, remember that small acts build into large outcomes. Hit the like button if you believe rules should protect people and not empower abusers. Subscribe if you want more stories where patience and proof beat intimidation. The rest of the story is about consequence and about how communities can reshape themselves when the truth is forced out into the light. The courthouse did not look dramatic from the outside. Just gray stone and glass reflecting a pale morning sky. Inside, though, the air carried a tension that no building could hide. You could feel it in the shuffle of shoes, the low coughs, the whisper of paper. I sat behind the plaintiff's table with Sarah beside me. Her eyes steady, her hands calm. Across the aisle, Gregory sat in a dark suit that fit too perfectly. His lawyer leaned close, whispering in his ear that he did not look at me, but I could see the muscle in his jaw flex. The judge entered, and the sound of everyone standing filled the room. When we sat again, the quiet felt heavy. The clerk read the case number, and the formal language rolled through the air like ritual. This was not a movie moment. It was slower and sharper. Truth walks slower than fiction, but it steps harder when it arrives. Sarah opened with precision. She spoke about fiduciary duty, about the obligation of an elected board to its members. She laid out the sequence of contracts, the payments to HOA Property Services, the matching handwriting on the invoices, and the checks. The exhibits clicked into place one by one. The judge nodded slightly, making notes. When Gregory's lawyer stood, he tried to redirect. He said the payments were legitimate. He said the sewage trucks were part of a maintenance project that had not been finalized. He said I had been a disgruntled homeowner angry about fines. The words came rehearsed like lines on a stage. Then Sarah called me to testify that I stood. The bailiff swore me in. I sat and adjusted the microphone. The judge's face was unreadable. Sarah asked about the first violation notice. I told the story plainly. The tank, the fines, the midnight inspections, the smell behind the office, the unmarked truck. She let me speak without interruption. The words fell like stones into a well. Each one sank deep. Then she played the video. The courtroom lights dimmed. The sound of engines filled the space. The white truck on the screen, the hose, the movement of liquid, and Gregory's shadow caught in the beam. When the clip ended, the silence lingered. The judge looked up slowly. Gregory shifted in his chair. His lawyer whispered again, but his face was pale. Sarah presented the county report next. Contamination levels. Unregistered disposal system. Signatures that matched Gregory's authorization on a private account used to bill the HOA. The defense tried to challenge the chain of evidence, but the judge overruled. The documentation was complete. Then something unexpected happened. The assistant board member, Pamela, stood up from the back of the courtroom and asked to speak. She was nervous, her voice trembling but clear. She said she had been instructed to sign contracts she did not understand. She said she had been told to shred certain records before the audit. The judge asked if she was under oath. She said she was willing to be. The room shifted. Even Gregory's lawyer looked down at his notes. Pamela's statement lasted only a few minutes, but it sealed everything. Gregory's face tightened. He stared at the table, his hands clasped too tightly. When the judge finally called for recess, he walked past me, without looking up. His lawyer followed him out into the hallway. The reporters waiting outside caught them both, but he said nothing. The image of his silence appeared on local news that night, and silence became his confession. The following week, the judge issued a preliminary ruling. Gregory Marsh and 2 other board members were removed from office, pending the final decision. The HOA was placed under temporary management by a neutral administrator. The accounts were frozen for audit. Restitution for misused funds would be determined after full review. The court also ordered a compliance program for all future board elections and financial transparency requirements for 5 years. When the ruling was read, the room stayed quiet for a long moment. No applause. An outburst. Just relief moving through people like a breath released after years of holding it. I stepped outside into sunlight that felt new. Reporters clustered, but I kept walking. Maya caught my eye and lifted her camera, slightly asking without words if I wanted to speak. I nodded once. She asked what justice felt like. I said it feels quiet, like something heavy has been lifted but the marks still remain. She asked what I would tell people in other neighborhoods facing similar abuse. I said document everything. Do not fight anger with anger. Let the truth work for you. It moves slowly, but it never stops moving. That interview aired that evening. The headline was simple. Homeowner exposes HOA corruption through patience and proof. The comments were full of people sharing their own stories. Some angry, some inspired. But what mattered was that the story was out. The pattern had a name now, and other people could recognize it. Gregory tried to file an appeal, but without funds and without allies it withered. The audit findings were conclusive. Over $40,000 in misused community funds, unreported contracts, unauthorized personal gains. The sewage dumping had been an attempt to cut corners on repair costs while charging full rates to the HOA account. The state environmental agency fined his company separately. The figure was heavy enough to break him. Weeks later, I passed him on the street. He looked smaller, thinner. He did not meet my eyes. I did not gloat. I simply nodded once and kept walking. That was enough. Some people deserve to feel the weight of their own choices in silence. The community changed slowly. New board members were elected. The new manager posted every financial statement online. Meetings were open and recorded. The smell behind the office was gone, replaced by the clean scent of chlorine and trimmed grass. People began to greet each other again. Children rode bikes near the pool fence. It was not perfect, but it was alive again. That night I sat on my porch with the old violation letters in a folder beside me. I did not burn them. They were reminders. Proof that small things matter. The sound of crickets filled the yard. The sky was streaked with faint stars. that in the distance the streetlights glowed over Cedar Ridge Drive. The same lights that had once illuminated my fear now looked softer somehow. The neighborhood was still here. So the story of what happened next is not about revenge anymore. It is about what remains after it. About how a person rebuilds calm after noise. About what it means to take your power back without losing your peace. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds and fell across the wooden table. My coffee steamed quietly beside a folder of documents that no longer carried weight. The war with the HOA was over. The noise was gone. What remained was stillness and the faint hum of ordinary life returning. The first thing I noticed in those early days of calm was how different silence felt. Before it had been the silence of tension, of waiting for another letter, another fine, another knock on the door. Now it was soft, a silence that let you breathe. It came with the rustle of leaves, the sound of sprinklers, and the gentle murmur of neighbors talking again. The garden that had once started everything had grown wilder but beautiful. Flowers burst with color. Vines crept along the fence. The bees were back. I spent the morning trimming the hedges and realized I did not care whether the lines were perfect. Nature was never meant to be symmetrical. It only needed space to live. A few days later, the temporary HOA manager stopped by. Her name was Clara. She was polite, her voice calm in a way that felt rare now. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a notice stating that all false fines against my property had been rescinded. Attached was our fund check for every dollar I had paid under protest. I looked at the number and laughed quietly. Not because of the money, but because it represented closure. Clara said the new board wanted to thank me. I said they did not have to. She said they wanted to anyway. She told me a new bylaw had passed that required all major maintenance contracts to be voted on by residents. Transparency had become part of the system itself. That was the real victory. In the evenings, I walked my dog along the same route past the old HOA office. The building looked ordinary again. Fresh paint. No fence. A new sign that simply said Cedar Ridge Association Office. I sometimes stopped and looked at the place where the sewage drain used to be. The smell was gone. In its place was a small patch of grass, just beginning to grow. One afternoon, Rosa came by with a basket of flowers from her yard. She said the neighborhood felt lighter. She said people were smiling again. She said her husband had finally put up the swing set they had delayed for years because they feared HOA complaints, that I helped them tighten the bolts and watch their children swing beneath the sun. It was simple and it was enough. There were still reminders. Occasionally a new homeowner would ask about the old board. Someone would whisper the story in pieces. The video still existed online. The local paper had archived the articles. My name was in them, but I had learned to live with that. The tension faded quickly because the tension always does. What remained was the steady rhythm of normal life. The kind that feels invisible until someone tries to take it away. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The trees along Cedar Ridge turned gold, and then bare and then green again. Each change felt like a marker. The kind of quiet transformation that tells you time is working as it should. I spent weekends fixing the porch rail, painting the shutters, and planting herbs by the fence. The work felt different now. It was not maintenance. It was care. Sometimes I would catch my reflection in the window and think about how far things had come. I no longer looked for conflict in every sound. The old tension had drained away. The past was still there, but it no longer owned me. On the 1-year mark of the ruling, the neighborhood gathered at the community park for Asmal barbecue. It was simple food and folding chairs, and the kind of laughter that comes easily. Clara gave a short speech thanking everyone for rebuilding trust. She handed me Asmal plaque, that red Community Integrity Award. The words made me smile. I told them it belonged to everyone. When the sun began to set, people lingered instead of leaving. Children ran through sprinklers. Someone played guitar softly. I sat on the grass and watched the light fade. The smell of grilled food and cut grass mixed with the cool air. I realized that peace does not arrive in a single moment. It grows slowly through consistency and patience. Later that night, I walked home under the glow of the streetlights. I passed the house where Gregory used to live. It was empty now, for sale sign leaning slightly in the wind. I stood there for a moment and felt nothing sharp or angry, only a calm acceptance that some endings do not need applause. Some justice happens quietly. Back at my porch, I looked out over the garden. The rainwater tank still stood behind the garage, the same one that had started it all. It caught the light of the moon and shimmered faintly. I smiled. That small gray tank had outlasted fear, intimidation, and corruption. It had become a symbol of persistence that I sat down with a cup of tea and let the night settle around me. The world was still imperfect. There would always be people who mistook power for control. But I had learned something they could not take back. That truth moves slow but steady. That patience can be sharper than rage. That peace, when it finally comes, is its own kind of revenge. So if you're listening to this, and you are facing your own quiet war, hold on. Keep your records. Keep your calm. Keep your faith that right will rise even when it seems buried under noise. Because sometimes the cleanest justice is not loud. Sometimes peace itself is the loudest revenge of all.